Hey there, this is Jamie Russo. Thanks for joining me. It's great to be here. Okay, we are going to talk today about a topic that came up in the Facebook group, and I love a bunch of things about this. It's a great question, it's a great challenge. And thank you, Karen Tate. Huge shout out to Karen Tate, who is outside of London, for offering up a blog post that she had kind of in her back pocket that answers this question. So she was DMing it to folks. So we took our idea and wrote a blog post for you. So we're going to offer that up once we get into the episode here. Karen has been a part of our programs for a long time, and I know Karen and was excited to hear that she's working on a response to this question. So the question or challenge is, how do you get folks to not have the square footage conversation? So, if you have folks coming in who are used to looking at traditional leases, traditional commercial real estate, you know this because you signed a lease. They think in price per square foot. And there are probably a lot of tenants who maybe don't know that until they learn it from their broker, because you probably didn't know it until you started looking for space, to house your co-working business. But the brokers for sure think this way. And as a matter of fact, this is a topic. So I'm running a course with Kane Wilmot for Avison Young, which is a major brokerage company. Well, they do a lot of things, but one of the things they do is commercial office brokerage. And they're super committed to making sure that their brokers in the field understand how to integrate flexible workspace into their holistic recommendations to their clients. So it may not be the answer. So putting a tenant in a co-working space may not be the answer, but as we all know who are listening, co-working, flexible office, meeting space, event space, hub and spoke space, we have a lot of solutions that are really useful to traditional occupiers today of all sizes, right? So we have solutions that might augment traditional office space. So we have this conversation with the brokers. We've run, I think, 5 cohorts of this course now. We have another one coming up at the end of the year. We love doing it. It's a lot of fun. And we work with brokers who are interested in flex and want to understand it. And they have some great success stories. But this is definitely one of the challenges that they have. Brokers think it, and so tenants think it. They think co-working is expensive because they're looking at it on a square footage basis. So Kane has an awesome way of teaching this in our class. And he covers this section, but I saw it come up in the Facebook group and I thought, okay, I'm going to sort of cover this a little bit. I won't give away like all of the secrets, and approaches that we share in the class, but I want to cover some of the concepts because it comes up a lot, and it would be good for you to know how to think through it and to be able to have those conversations either with brokers or with potential members. So the challenge I think that we're facing, so it might have been Andrea posted this in the Facebook group and said, people come in and want to, ask like, what is the price per square foot? And as co-working operators, some of you may not know it, so you may not be able to share it, or you just don't want to talk about it. So, I run a program called the Co-working Startup School. We have started actually to teach it in a sense in terms of pricing. So when you're looking at how to price your co-working space, it's kind of important to understand what is the market doing, and one of the best ways to get apples to apples is to try to get an understanding of how your market is pricing per square foot. So you can look at per seat, that is a good indicator, but not every office is the same size. So a 4-person office in a WeWork is different than a 4-person office in a Bond Collective, is different than a 4-person office in another co-working space. So understanding the per seat price is important. That's what I used to always teach. And now when I do pricing analysis for folks, if I'm working with an asset owner, I will look at the square footage pricing. And when I'm also looking at pricing power, I want to understand, how much, how are we pricing per square foot, both on a monthly basis and an annual basis. That's important to understand too. Different markets will refer to it differently. So my first location was in Chicago, and that they talk about pricing on an annualized basis. So it's $23 a square foot. And in California, they tend to talk about it on a monthly basis. And I had trouble doing the fast math in my brain sometimes. I mean, I can do the quick math if it's a easy round number, but I always, I naturally kind of go to that annualized number, but I always look at it both ways just so I can have those conversations. But it's good to know some people will use an annualized basis, $20 a square foot, or somebody will use a monthly basis, like $2 a square foot, which would be $24 on an annualized basis. So anyway, okay, so I want to set a little bit more context here. Why is this question coming up? It's probably always come up. And again, we don't kind of like to talk about it because what we're offering is not square footage, right? We're offering space as a service. And I know some of you out there hate that term, so call it whatever you want. But we are not focused on the 250. So 250 square feet is roughly a 4-person office, right? So if you want to, go head to head against a commercial office lease and, you're selling your 250 square feet for $2,000 a month, that's going to look high, right? Because the per square foot cost of that is high compared to a traditional lease. So if you just compare apples to apples, so I didn't do the math ahead of time, but let's say that office is $130 a square foot, right? 250 divided by whatever 2,500 divided by 2. Well, I could do that math. Hold on. Okay, so if you're talking about a 250 square foot office, roughly 4 people, and you're charging $2,500 a month, that's $10 a foot on a monthly basis, $120 on an annualized basis. Now, this totally depends on the market. That is in the ballpark of what would be probably reasonable for a lot of markets. A lot of times I see, 130-ish, but again, it depends on pricing power and the state of the commercial real estate market. So price per square foot in a hot market is going to look different than the price per square foot in a rural market. Very different, as a matter of fact. So this is just an example, but $120 a foot, right, for this 250 square feet. And the broker's thinking, well, 250 square feet is tiny, and you're asking $120 a square foot for that on an annualized basis when they can go get traditional commercial real estate for $25 a square foot, right? It's just not apples to apples. What you are providing, and you know this, but I'm just kind of setting the context, is that 4-person office and all the common space, the kitchens, probably restrooms, reception area, soft seating, meeting rooms, all this other space that they have access to, right? So it's not just the 250 square feet, it's all of the common space that you have. So one way to do this would be to add up all of that common space and then give a per square foot number based on that. That's what I used to do if I was really pressed by someone who really wanted to know how many square feet. I would do it that way. Just add up all the common area and then say, here's what the price is per square foot to all the space that you get access to. Now, not all of that is dedicated space. The dedicated space is your 4-person office with the door that closed. So the thing you want to be careful about is that some operators will give square footage. So if you go on Liquid Space, for example, which I do often to look at pricing, you will see that companies like Regus, although I don't think Regis's pricing is accurate on Liquid Space or any of the other places that you'll see it pop up, but some operators, Industrious does it, will put in square footage of the office. Expansive does it. So it is out there. It's not that none of the operators are using that as a metric because they probably get pressed more often and have just decided, you know what, if everybody's going to ask for it, we're just going to put it online. But most co working space operators avoid putting it up there. But it is good to know because also, like, a one person WeWork office might be 36 square feet, which is not ADA compliant. ADA compliant would be 54 square feet. And a one person office in your space might be 80 square feet or 100 square feet, right? So it does matter to some extent. Those number ranges probably sound a little bit small, but the difference between 56 square feet and 100 square feet is pretty significant. It's almost twice as big, right? So the size does matter, and being able to tell somebody how many square feet you are compared to another operator, if they're pretty savvy and they're really, kind of comparing, can be helpful. We don't love to talk about it because, again, the value is that the total cost of occupancy usually is less. Okay, so somebody else made the comment in the Facebook group that, hey, if somebody's like really focused on this number, then they may not be a fit for co-working. So again, just to zoom out, I would say in general, the folks who are really great for co-working, they understand already all the pain points of having their own office space, and they're looking to avoid that, or they're small enough that it makes zero sense to get their own space. So if you are, there is, well, let's set a little more context. I would say what is shifting in the marketplace. It used to be, right, if you were a small company, it just made no sense for you to go find space. There's not a lot of small square footage office space on the market pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. In most markets, that space just didn't really exist. Sometimes it existed, and usually it was not very high quality. And you still had to furnish it yourself, and you still have to go get your own internet connection, and then you're sitting all alone in kind of a crappy office. So that has changed to some extent. So what is happening out there? Well, in some markets there's a whole lot of sublease space. That is happening in San Francisco. There's a giant vacancy of co-working, or of commercial office space. And some of it is sitting there furnished, right? So there's furnished sublease space in a lot of markets. And so brokers and even tenants are sort of just anchoring in defaulting to this idea that, like, well, we'll just go get a cheap sublease that is furnished. And they consider that to be move-in ready. So to some companies of varying sizes, that is a pretty decent solution. If they want their own office space, then they've got this move-in ready option that is their own and has their own entrance and all those things that are pretty compelling to a lot of businesses. And they can probably get a decent deal on it. Maybe they negotiate, below market rent on the sublease. And again, it's furnished, so they can like walk in and kind of get rolling. Now, Kane is always pointing out to our broker cohorts that subleases are not actually really move-in ready. Like, you're not going to walk in and do nothing usually. Like, are you taking their IT equipment? No. Did they leave the coffee equipment? Probably not. Can you actually use all their furniture as is? Maybe, maybe not. Do you need to paint? Do you need to, change out the carpet, etc.? Usually a space is not truly move-in ready. And on a sublease, the landlord is not going to give you tenant improvement dollars. So you're spending some money to get into the space. Again, that is less than you would to fit out your own space. Anybody who is open and is an operator or is working through this process, and we just started our second cohort of our live version of our co-working startup school, which we love. If any of you are listening, I just listened. Kim Lee is one of our coaches. She did the first session. She is an amazing facilitator. I probably said this last time, but every time I listen to her, I'm like, she's so good at this. But I listen to the recordings because I love hearing everyone's story and what they're working on and where they are and how they're thinking about it. So the costs are pretty significant to lease commercial office space, to do construction, to buy furniture. We'll go into these details in a minute, right? It's a giant pain in the butt. And I had to do this I worked before I did co-working. Well, I went to business school. If you're watching on YouTube, I have my booth t-shirt on. But before that, I worked for a startup company and I was one of the first employees. And we were the perfect candidate for a co working space, but it did not exist at the time. So we took, I don't know, was it 2,500 square feet of space? Maybe it was 3,000 square feet. And, we bought our own furniture. We had to get the internet set up. We had to even the lounge furniture. We had to go buy the lounge furniture. We bought IKEA desks. We had to put together the IKEA desks. It was a huge, giant pain. And we had these really big clients that we had to service. And so we were working like 1,000,000 hours a day and figuring out all of this other stuff, it was ridiculous. And with this tiny kitchen that wasn't that great, we had to negotiate for an espresso machine, which I really wanted. So we just didn't have a lot of amenities. It was a perfectly fine office, but I cannot even imagine how happy we would have been in a co-working space. And we were constantly adding people. Sometimes we'd subtract people. After I left, they had some downsizing, but we were really unable to predict how much space we needed. So co-working would have been perfect for us. Okay, so that's the other thing that's happening in the marketplace besides subleases is spec suites. So landlords are creating spec suites that are what I just described for this small company that I joined. There were, I don't know, 15 of us in that office. And I could do better math and figure out exactly how much square footage we had based on 15 people. But landlords are saying, okay, if you need 2,500 or 3,000 square feet, that's fine. We're going to chop up suites. We're going to put carpet in. We're going to sort of make them, we're not going to furnish them, but they're going to be pretty ready to go. So you have to get your own furniture. You have to get your own internet connection. If you want phone lines, you got to set up the phone lines. You got to do your own reception. You have to do all of those things yourself. But there's carpet and there's some walls, and it's kind of set up probably about how you'd like it. That's one range. Some landlords are even doing sort of move-in ready spec suites with the internet lit up. There's some furniture in there. And some co-working space operators, if you're listening and you're one of these folks, I think it's brilliant, run an HQ model where you provide that type of suite in the building where your co-working space operates so that those members can take advantage of co-working services and one point of contact, but still have their own private door access and their own private suite and all those things. We were touring Studio by Tishman is a great example. And Kane and I toured, I'm sure he's toured their spaces before. I had not been in one. And we went into one of their DC locations. And they have these great, I think it's called Studio Private, I think is what it's called. And they, it can be fully serviced. They'll handle your IT. They'll give you like op support. They'll stock your snacks. They'll basically do everything. But it's a suite that looks as if it's yours. It's branded. It's furnished and, it's all set up and it has a private entrance, but somebody's servicing it and it's in the building where there's co-working. So I love that product. I think it's really smart. And for landlords that are getting kind of integrated with co-working operators, that product's going to make a lot of sense. So you're also competing with that type of product, which is priced more closely to a co-working product, especially with those services added on. So Tishman adds, or Studio, I should say, adds a la carte fees for those services, which is also pretty smart. So you can opt into those or not, but certainly that will add up and increase your total cost of occupancy. So kind of rambling a little bit. I'm weaving in a lot of topics here. Let's get back to the total cost of occupancy. So there's a lot of product out there, I guess, that is now competing with co-working. The subleases, the spec suites, the private studios being operated by landlords and co-working space operators. So the least expensive of those would be a sublease. And now, again, if somebody wants a sublease, I'm not sure you're going to be able to compete with that in terms of a primary office, but you might be an add-on location, you might be an event location, you might be a meeting space location, you might be an offsite location, you might be a hub and spoke solution. So there's a lot of roles you can still play besides sort of the, long-term membership that, of course, we're all looking for ongoing, recurring revenue. So, okay. So how do we think about this if somebody comes in and says, wants to talk about square footage? So total cost of occupancy is the concept of this is that it goes beyond the cost per square foot, right? So the total cost of occupancy includes rent, yes. So it includes base rent. It includes operating expenses, so things like property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. In a sublease, some of those might be wrapped in, and in a co-working space, they're going to be bundled into the membership fee. So additional costs of occupancy, furniture. Okay, furniture costs a lot of money if you're buying it from scratch. So if you're competing with somebody who is looking for a small office and they have to buy their own furniture, the fact that you have that included and that's not an upfront cost for them is a big deal. So you could do the math on how much would it cost them to furnish their own, 4-person, 10-person, 20-person office, plus meeting rooms, plus all the tech they'd have to buy. Think about all, the kitchen supplies. How about the fancy coffee machine? Kane always mentions he buys the fancy, push button coffee machines that make amazing coffee. Those machines are like $30,000. So if you're already open or you're working on opening, that the furniture and the equipment is really expensive. So that's usually $20 a foot ish, maybe more. If you're a higher end space, could be a little bit less, but that adds up, right? So if folks are getting their own furniture and equipment, you have to include that in the cost of occupancy. So if someone is going to get their own office space, they have to buy the furniture and all the equipment. If they're going to join a co-working space, it's already bundled into that membership fee. So utilities and amenities, again, like coffee, meeting rooms, cleaning service, those things are bundled into the membership fee. But if you are leasing your own space, you're going to pay for those things as line items, right? In addition to rent. So again, this is to get them out of comparing just the rent. Back to that, hey, you're charging $120 a foot for this 4-person office. That's crazy when I can get my own space for $24 a foot. Okay, but that's only rent. So you have to add on operating expenses, which we talked about, furniture and equipment, utilities and amenities, and then staff. So I would bucket like your community manager into that. When I worked for this startup and we had this small amount of space, we still had to have somebody who she was an office manager. She would meet clients. She would, sort of greet guests. She'd handle the mail. She'd call the Comcast when the internet went out. She'd deal with the landlord when, a light bulb needed to be changed. So we still had to have somebody who allocated hours to managing the space. There's a, sizable cost in there that you want to make sure you're including. We already talked about like coffee and snacks. So those are all direct costs. How about the cost of flexibility? In a co-working space, maybe you're signing for a year. If you're taking more space, you might sign for 2 years. But in general, it's pretty darn flexible. Subleases are not going to be for a year. They're going to be for longer, right? And a commercial lease, the spec suites may be shorter term, but again, usually you're still going to have to do a bunch of things yourself. So the total occupancy cost is still more than just the rent. And they want at least a year. Maybe they want more like 3 years. So the ultimate flexibility really lies in co-working. So that's really important too. And the ability to flex up and down. So you're not paying for a fixed amount of space. You can flex up if you need to hire folks. You can flex down if things change in your business. So you really want to show the layers of all of the costs of occupancy that someone is going to incur depending on the type of space that they take. Again, if they're taking a sublease that's fully furnished, that's the perfect size for them, they are still going to have some costs, and it's possible that it comes out to be a little bit less than a co-working space. But there's still a whole bunch of things that they need to do to manage that space. They still have to get their own internet. They still have to manage, they go get their own IT equipment, set it all up and manage it. Somebody still has to manage the coffee and greet the desks, greet the guests, maybe put together the desks. So there's still a bunch of stuff that has to get done if somebody's taking a sublease. So this is the challenge. Is this might seem obvious to you, like, of course, like, co-working is plug and play and is worth, it's totally worth like every penny. Or why would you think about it in terms of square footage? It's about the experience, it's about the community. I mean, we haven't even covered that, right? In most small companies, there's nobody managing the community, there's nobody hosting member events, um, there's nobody doing all of those things, like creating a vibe. Nobody's doing that, creating community, bringing people together, hosting happy hour with the charcuterie board, hosting, pumpkin carving day, gift wrapping stations. That if that is happening, there's a person with costs associated with that. Um, so but so the perfect co-working customer just gets that, right? Like, that's intuitive. They don't really need to do the math. They're like, oh yeah, easy button over here, very hard button over here. But brokers and folks that are used to commercial real estate, they think in terms of square footage. They're not kind of framing it the way we're framing it. So you have to help them frame it. So by having these conversations with them, and this takes some work because this is like hardwired if they've been doing this for a long time. So if you've got brokers who've been selling commercial real estate for 20 years, it's going to take some unwiring for them to get used to this idea. Like, all, what comes in the package and how do you compare that? And we do this great breakout that Kane designed in our course for the brokers that really just helps them have this aha moment. It compares the total cost of occupancy. So we go through a bunch of cells on the Excel, and then you hit the summary tab and it shows you how co-working is actually usually less expensive. And by the way, for the brokers listening, this is a sort of a separate topic, but I'm just going to bring it up as a bonus. The broker gets paid on the total cost of occupancy in a co-working space, right? Because it's all wrapped into the membership fee. In a traditional lease, they only get paid for base rent. So that's it. So they don't get paid for all of the other things that the tenant is paying for. So the broker can do quite well when they're placing folks into co-working spaces, especially when it's multiple seats, not usually if it's a flex desk or a dedicated desk or a one-person office. But when we're talking about multiple seats, things get pretty interesting. So hopefully this is helping. If you can provide a visual handout to the folks that are sort of, having this challenge and bringing up these questions, that can help. You usually also really have to walk them through it. I love the blog post idea. Certainly it's good for SEO. It cannot hurt. We have an opt-in for a sample blog post for this. You can grab that at everythingcoworking.com/TCO for total cost of occupancy. So let me just think about here what else we want to talk about here. Again, there's direct costs and then there's indirect costs. So you also, especially these days, you really want to walk people through the advantage of the flexibility that you have in your space. So it's not just about the direct costs, the coffee machine, the furniture, the actual, lease, the internet fee, the cleaning services, but the advantage of being able to flex that up and down as needed is really compelling to a lot of folks. And then the amenities, and also just, how about this? How about the easy button on co-working for creating an office that people actually want to show up to, right? It can be pretty hard to create an office that folks want to come to. And again, you have to have someone on staff who's doing the member engagement activities and all the fun things that make people want to come to the office. Or you have to pay for really expensive amenities that maybe don't come with the building. Maybe they do come with the building. But oftentimes co-working spaces are choosing locations that have these built in, and including meeting rooms and offsite rooms and event spaces and all those things that can be really useful to your company and allow a company, sorry, I'm talking as if you're the client, and allow the company to really take only what they need, right? And then use these meeting rooms and offsite rooms just as needed. So they're paying a la carte a lot of times for that space, which is also a huge advantage, because think of all the meeting spaces that are sitting unused, or the desks that are sitting unused in traditional office space. So that's an indirect benefit as well. Co-working spaces are usually in central locations, which can be convenient for employees. So these are some of the like other benefits that you might, that are, it's not really total occupancy cost, but there's sort of a cost in quote, to that, the convenience factor for employees and clients, because again, usually co-working spaces are, um, we pick those locations to make them easy to get to, usually easy to park. Okay, so when talking to a potential member about total occupancy cost, or total cost of occupancy, I guess you could do TCO or TOC. We're going to do TCO, total cost of occupancy. When you're talking to a potential member, one, know when you're not going to win and let it go, right? There are folks who just aren't a fit. They're really, really just like stuck on this idea that they want their own space. They would never use a co-working space, or they just cannot buy what you're selling around total cost of occupancy. And so just let them go, because there will be folks who just really get it, and are thrilled that you're here. So you need to, spend your sales and marketing time on folks that are more likely to convert. So just, kind of feel it out. And if you don't think you're going to get anywhere, if somebody's just way too difficult, just leave it, But you can use some tools. So I love the blog post. We'll give you that. You can use a visual that kind of stacks the total cost of occupancy against the one membership fee with everything all bundled in. Sometimes people just really need to see a visual that helps drive it home and really make the point. So if they're not used to framing it that way, using the visual can like have a major light bulb moment. And train your team. And actually, now that I'm thinking about this, we have done total cost of occupancy training for our community managers, and I'm going to refresh it and bring that back up for them, because this conversation is probably happening more and more. When I say our community managers, I mean in our community manager university. So if this is a topic that you're struggling with, enroll your team into community manager university, and they can go through that training and really kind of get it ingrained. Because if it's your team that's giving tours and having these conversations in person, over email, you want them to really get it, right? You want them to be able to have these conversations and walk potential members through it. So that's a great way to do it. My computer screen. Oh, I know why. I put my ring light up and it keeps tipping over my giant computer screen. Anyway, you can only see that if you're on YouTube. You see me, my like rewriting the monitor. Okay, what else do we want to talk about? So this is an important conversation to be comfortable with. This is probably mostly important if you have offices that are not 1 or 2 person offices, right? You're probably not having this conversation with very small groups. You're having this conversation if you have suites or larger spaces. So be prepared for those. And again, have these conversations with your team. Do some role playing, role play the pain in the butt client who only wants to talk about, cost per square foot. Know that the brokers are going to come in thinking that way, and don't hate on these people because they think that way. It's just how commercial real estate is usually talked about, right? So you got to help them think differently about it, and certainly be willing to have the conversation. So okay, that's it for today. If you guys have more questions about this, send me a DM, pop in the Facebook group, and the blog post is available at everythingcoworking.com/TCO. All right, we'll see you next week.